Okay, so the end of 9.1, this is part 4, and it's going to lead into 9.2, part 1, a review of Russian history, going back to Russia for Unit 9.2 and the Russian Revolution. So, the impact of World War I on European society on page 12 is where we left off. So, let's talk first. Of course, we already know, no spoiler, there's going to be a massive amount of casualties from World War I. We're going to see 10 million soldiers dead. Also 10 million civilians dead, because remember, this is total war. So it involved all peoples of all the nations involved. However, many of those are going to be from the influenza epidemic. In 1918, we're going to see a worldwide flu epidemic that's going to take a lot of lives as well. So that just compounds the casualties from World War I. We're going to see also on the other side of it, to where we're moving in Unit 9.2, that 15 million are going to be dead in the Russian Revolution, the revolution that had caused Russia to leave World War I to focus on things going on at home. So we'll be touching on that again in more detail very quickly. So we're going to see, because of this, that the birth rate is going to fall significantly after the war, though illegitimate births will increase, and this is just because of a lack of men. You have all of these men dead, so 10 million soldiers, then including 10 million civilians, so that's labor force as well. We will talk about birth rate again as we move into the Russian Revolution and then into World War II and post-World War II, but right now birth rates are down. Because of this, war is going to promote greater social equality. I like to compare it to like when we talked about the Black Death at the beginning of the year and how that kind of flipped everything upside down in Europe. Because of the amount of people dead, we're going to see the blurring of class distinctions and lessening the gap between the rich and the poor. The Russian Revolution, which we're moving toward, is going to abolish the nobility and give women more rights than any other country in Europe. We're going to see that women are going to receive the right to vote in Britain the same year that the war ended. So Germany will soon follow with this. So we're going to start to see that respect for the women that had stepped up in this total war and worked in the factories, and out of that they're going to get some suffrage. The nobility in Germany, Austria, and Russia is going to lose much of its influence and prestige, which we're going to talk about in more detail. And during the war, women had taken over jobs of men, but had still been paid lower wages, and so we're going to follow that plight of the woman as we continue on as well. But as far as casualties go, I mean, we're really looking, if you break those numbers down, about 6,000 people are dead a day for 1,500 days. So like Josh should be hitting the floor right now. That's a really significant number. 6,000 people dead a day for 1,500 days. So when it comes to loss per country, we're going to see, as you can see in this nice graph here, so Russia's here in kind of this pinkish purple, that Russia had the most loss due to World War I. Remember, like, they're having 1 gun per 5 soldiers, but still sending that manpower in, and then plus, on top of that is going to be the Russian Revolution, so a lot of men lost. We're going to see that Germany and Austria-Hungary, of course, involved from the very beginning, are going to be right here in second, in the green and the yellow. And then we have France here following right behind. Great Britain going to be down here, and then Italy, Turkey, and then the very least amount lost, of course, because of our late entries in the United States. We're in last, and really we have fewer men. Like, we have the amount of men that we lost is the amount that some countries, especially Russia, Germany, and Austria and Hungary, lost in some battles. So we have 320,000. I mean, that's like, what they lost in one battle, like the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Verdun. And so we don't have a significant loss of life. Plus, we're going to talk about in a little bit, we actually gain some economic privileges and become a great world power here, and so we'll go into what that means. Just want to show you a picture here. So we have 116,516 Americans died here, and this is an American cemetery in France. You see all the crosses lined up there. Some students said they had a problem seeing this picture, so I tried to zoom in when I re-recorded this. And so this is a cemetery there. So we do have a loss of life, but kind of a drop in the bucket compared to some of our other nations, especially Russia. Point 3, I'm kind of going to skip over here because we're going to come back to all of this, but just, give you a touch on how these things were impacted with World War I. Of course, dissent will be increased as the war continued. We talked about how people were unhappy with their leaders and with this war that was dragging on. We're going to come back to in Unit 9.2, the Tsar in Russia being overthrown by the provisional government, who was then overthrown by the Bolsheviks due to mounting war casualties, being at the top of that list. We've talked about the Irish rebellions, the Easter Rebellion that England will have to turn its attention to in 1916 during the war and put down. In Germany, militant socialists and anti-war activists. Rosa Luxemburg and Clara Zetkin were imprisoned for trying to convince fellow socialists not to support the war effort. We'll see large crowds of women in France, again women in France, Austria and Italy, protesting working conditions or high prices. We're going to see government censorship existing in virtually every country. Remember that propaganda, and people increasingly growing dissatisfied with the integrity of their governments. And along with that, we're going to see that with this unhappiness comes the end to some really long-standing royal dynasties. I mean, we're kind of going to see the end of everything that we've talked about since day one. We have the Habsburg dynasty will be removed in Austria. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't any Habsburg rulers still out there rolling around, but their dynasty is going to end. It had lasted for 500 years, so pretty much for day one of us in this class. The Romanov dynasty will be removed in Russia, which we're moving in directly next week. It had lasted for over 300 years. We're going to see communism come out of this. We're going to see the Hohenzollern dynasty is removed in Germany. It had lasted as well for 300 years. And the Ottoman Empire, a sick man of Europe, will finally be destroyed, and it had lasted for 500 years. So we're going to see that Europe is not only going to be, the map of Europe totally changed, but the ruling of Europe is going to totally change as well. So as I said, the political map of Europe is going to be redrawn, so not just the ruling families, but the actual look of the political map of Europe will change. We're going to see that's that push for self-determination. So they're going to redraw those lines there so that each nation can kind of determine its own leadership. We're going to see the creation of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Yugoslavia, and Albania will receive that sovereignty. We'd see pushing for. So you really have what is known as the map of Europe before 1919 and the map of Europe after 1919, which I think I have right here on this next slide. I can get it, my clicker to go. There we go. So Europe after 1919. Here's the map. You'll see we have all of these, what is newly created. We're going to talk about Germany in more detail in just a second. And so you have Poland, like I said, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Finland, it's going to be established Estonia, also Lithuania, and Yugoslavia. And so you can see all of that here. So this is what's redrawn right here, and the nice colors. But we need to talk about Germany in more detail, because remember, they get the big finger pointed at them for going through Belgium, for unrestricted submarine warfare, dealing with this blockade that they'd had from the British. And so what happens to Germany here? Okay, so Germany is going to be split in two by a Polish corridor. East Prussia is going to be separated from the rest of Germany. So if you can see here, we're always talking about that buffer on the map. So Germany, as a result of World War I and being blamed for World War I, will be split in two. The East Prussians on one side, split from the rest of Germany. And we're going to see that when Hitler comes to rise, that he does not like this. This is going to be one of those major things that is going to push us back into a World War II. It's the separation here. Remember, they've been not allowed to rearm, only 100,000 men in their military, no submarines, etc., etc. So all of this, I just want to keep that theme of, as a result of this treaty, there are going to be a lot of problems, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And you could look here, I mean, was the Congress of Vienna or the Treaty of Versailles, was it better? Which was better? I mean, if you look at the Congress of Vienna, we had 100 years without a significant, European power war. We're going to see, no spoiler alert, 20 years from now, another world war. It's going to turn the Great War into World War I. So, keeping that in mind, which treaty was better? I think that you can pretty firmly say the Congress of Vienna had held down disputes, but it had also held down all of those isms that we talked about. Conservatism, liberalism being one. They were conservatives, held down liberalism and nationalism and tried to do all of that. And did it really stop it, or did it build up this big pressure, this big powder keg in the Balkans? So I don't know. That's something of your opinion. You could kind of go both ways. But out of this treaty and this split, German nationalist resentment of the harsh Versailles Treaty is going to doom the new Weimar Republic in Germany. Remember those people that said, yeah, we're a republic now, or we've got Wilhelm II off. It's going to really these really harsh standards that Woodrow Wilson lets get through because he's holding on to his baby, point number 14, the League of Nations, we're going to see that German anger with the treaty is going to be partially responsible for the rise of Hitler in the early 1930s. Plus, we know the Great Depression is going to play a big role in that. And speaking of money, so we're not yet to the Great Depression, which is going to be pretty worldwide, but really going to hurt Germany because of the reparations that they're having to pay. We're going to start to see a shift in financial power after World War I. So where's this financial power going to go? It's going to shift to the United States. The United States is going to become the most powerful economic nation. It's going to become a creditor nation. It's going to start to lend money out, especially for all these countries trying to rebuild after World War I. Europe is going to lose its preeminent position that it had economically held and enjoyed for 500 years, pretty much since the beginning of this class, because they just started, white on white crime, like killing each other in Europe. And they're going to, after World War I, it's going to shift to the United States. And as I said, will become the world's leading creditor and greatest producer due to the drain of Europe's resources. And so this is going to be important. You also need to remember the United States, because of the Senate not agreeing to sign the Treaty of Versailles, is going to become isolationist. So we have all of this new power, but we're also going to kind of step off the scene. So keep that in mind as we move forward. So ultimately, these new unresolved political and economic differences are going to lead us to World War II. A lot of the impacts that we talk about are direct causes of World War II, and we're going to see that a prophetic book is written at this time, right after World War I, John Maynard Keynes. The Economic Consequences of Peace, 1919. That is his work, and he is going to predict that the harsh terms of this treaty would hurt Germany's economy and thus the economy of the rest of Europe and lead to significant future political unrest. And it's like prophetic. It is right. His book pretty much is like a blueprint of what's going to go wrong and lead us into World War II. He says in this book that there's no way Germany will recover and this will equal future problems. And he's right, because when Hitler took control of Germany in 1933 and began his aggressive policies, his predictions, for those who are educated and read it, it's like, uh-oh. Okay, so here we are. So keeping that in mind, this book will probably be mentioned in impact of World War I and moving towards World War II on an AP exam. And so the economic consequences of the peace, as pictured here, just the end of laissez-faire we talked about, because the socialists are going to say, hey, total government control. Hey, well, this was being used during the war. Let's continue it. So keeping all those problems in mind. And so I really just want to sum up the impact of World War I on European society with a quote that kind of encapsulates everything I've just talked to you about. And that is by this French guy named Foch. And this is a quote: "This is not peace. It is an armistice, or, a ceasefire for 20 years, which I think really sums the whole thing up. It's not like the Congress of Vienna where we're going to see a 100-year slump in war. It's really just a ceasefire for 20 years up until September 1st of 1939, when Germany will make the same move they made in Belgium, but this time in Poland. And we'll see all of these things that are festering because of World War I, and a lot of the problems that exist today in this part of the world are festering at the surface due to World War I. So that's the end of Unit 9.1. We've kind of summed up World War I, and then we need to do a very quick review of Russian history up to the Russian Revolution, because we're going to turn our attention back there and what's going on at home that's going to cause Russia to leave World War I, and also bring us into our first communist nation. Okay, so when it comes to Unit 9.2, I was looking over and getting ready to re-record this for you because I threw the review of Russia from 1815 to 1853 at the beginning. Our new material doesn't actually start until, let's see, about page 7 or 8. And so instead of making you listen to all of that again, here's the deal. You need to know the information. You need to remember where we left off. So if you would like, and it's typed in the same order, to go back and review where Russia had been and where it's going, or how it got to Nicholas II, how it got to Nicholas during World War I, and what's going on in Russia, you can re-listen to Unit 8.2, Part 4 to review. Or you can just read through the notes. I've typed them out, in fuller detail, expecting to do this review very quickly, so not to have to stop a lot. But you need to come in either prepared with this background knowledge very firm, because we've had a unit in between, or to come in with those questions that you still have about how we get to Nicholas' second bit. I was going to say, well, do we have to re-listen to the whole thing? That's several pages. And yes, you've already had it, but you need to make sure that you understand, because we're going to be focusing solely on Russia for Unit 9.2, all of those little intricacies that go into getting us up to Nicholas II, getting us into World War I, and then what gets Russia out of World War I. And so make sure that you read all the way through. It goes in the order. And your Age of Mass Politics 8.2 Part 4, you can go back and re-listen to that lecture if you'd like my narration behind it. But make sure you come into class prepared with this information and ready to start Unit 9.2 when I see you on Tuesday. So make sure you have all of that. You can take some notes off to the side again and listen to 8.2. Or like I said, I have very clearly outlined it here. So part of your homework is that review. Okay, I will see you next week. Thanks.